Good morning, U.S. history. We will be beginning chapter 27, World War II. In chapter 26, we saw the build-up to World War II. We saw the outbreak in Europe, and then we left off with the U.S. being dragged into the war through its own policies and through the attack by Japan. So for the United States, World War I will be 1941 to 1945. Let's not forget that Europe had begun and Japan had begun a couple years before this. World War II is going to be even more of a turning point than World War I was. It's going to change the status of the U.S. in terms of the world. It's going to solidify us as a world superpower. Again, the Allies will cooperate throughout the war, even us and the Soviet Union, who was totalitarian, but we cooperate with Stalin because Hitler is seen as a bigger threat. The home front changes migration. We have new race, gender, and economic opportunities. And the United States government is going to mobilize even more so the economy than it's ever done before to produce for the war effort. Okay. Despite the fact that FDR had seen the writing on the wall and begun to repeal the Neutrality Acts and slowly allow us to loan money and to travel and protect the convoys, and then we were in an undeclared naval war, we were definitely unprepared for the war. Fortunately, we had started a peacetime draft. Let's see here. Okay, so we weren't ready. Military funding was low. Let's not forget that wars cost a lot of money, and we had to figure out a way to pay for it. In the 1930s, we ranked 45th in size out of the entire world for a military, and the Allies were struggling in the first couple years. As you can see here, Nazi Germany had expanded its empire to become, most of Europe. And then there is, let's not forget, the war in the Pacific with Japan's empire here. As you can see, they had creeped all the way down into Southeast Asia. They take the Philippines from us. Let's see, Bataan Death March. Okay, you should have read about that. And the Doolittle Raid is significant because it is the first time that U.S. planes are able to bomb mainland Japan. So the Japanese realized that they are susceptible to attack. They had kind of thought they were isolated enough. So they seek a decisive battle, which will be the Battle of Midway, in which the United States wins, fortunately using magic, which was a series of encryption codes and code breaking, deciphering. We picked up on what the Japanese were going to do. Okay, it is significant that using these intercepted codes, broken codes, we were there and waiting for the Japanese, unbeknownst to them. And the Battle of Midway is going to be, in 1942, is going to be a very decisive, it's this little island right here, a decisive battle. It's the turning point, okay? And until then, the Japanese had freely marched through Asia, and this is the tip of Australia. They were close to Australia, okay? But this is going to be the beginning of the end, a slow end. It's going to take us another 3 years. Throughout the war, last chapter, we saw the Atlantic Charter between FDR and Winston Churchill. And in it, they had a Europe First strategy, and the number one priority was defeating Hitler. Once Hitler was defeated, then we could finish off the Japanese. There was constant tension between the three because these two were democratic. These two got along. These two were friends. And then there was Stalin, who was a totalitarian. But the three of them, because Hitler was such a menace and Hitler had backstabbed Stalin, the three of them were stuck in it together. Stalin is constantly asking for a second front. Okay, he's getting thrashed here, and he wants the Allies to make a second front somewhere. And the Allies will eventually do that with D-Day, but they are not ready yet, so they push him off. This causes tension. Let's see. Churchill's biggest fear was another World War I, where we dug in with trenches. That will not occur because the further industrialization of weapons will create even more powerful weapons, and you won't be able to dig into trenches. Stalingrad will be the turning point in Eastern Europe, the Battle of Stalingrad, where Stalin's troops and civilians are ordered not to retreat, and they hold the city. This becomes the turning point because the Germans have to start retreating. This was very similar to Napoleon's mistake. All right. Okay, so what are we doing at home? Being unprepared and needing maximum effort out of our economy, FDR is going to take control of the economy, and he's going to call it the Great Arsenal of Democracy. An arsenal is your assortment of weapons. Okay, so it's the weapons for democracy, and the government creates the War Production Board. I want you to think of the War Production Board as like the head on a big body. All right, it's the brains behind it. It's going to coordinate airplanes, tanks, guns, ammunition, warships, everything needed. Okay, the War Production Board. Business universities get in on it with research and development. The government promotes this by offering tax breaks, things like that. As we'll see, it was not hard to convince big business to jump in because they were offered fixed profits, tax write-offs, and big business will get bigger. They will profit. They will make a lot of money off the war. Big business grows as much as 2/3 of all the War Production Board contracts go to the largest corporations. So again, the trend that we've seen throughout history. Sorry, I'm checking my. Okay, the Manhattan Project will be the top secret building of the atomic bomb. The Manhattan Project was done in various locations throughout the United States, all over the place, different pieces, and then would be put together into this bomb. Nobody knew exactly what they were working on. But again, the government enlists the help of universities to do so and gives them lots of money. This is the beginning of the military-industrial complex, which still exists today. And some 16 million men are in the military. So when 16 million men up and leave the factories and the workplace, we come up with a labor shortage. So the next question is, how do we fill the labor shortage? And just like in World War I, we go back to using women, but it's also going to open up avenues for African Americans, Mexican Americans, poor whites from the South. So we're going to see a migration trend, leaving the South and going to jobs, to factories. All right, some of the opportunities. Obviously, we still have Jim Crow, segregation, racism, etc. Blacks resist. FDR, to quell this, issues a historic order. It's Order 8802, and it bans discrimination in hiring for any defense industry, anything military related, anything in the government. So this is a good step in the right direction. The new defense jobs spur about 1.5 million blacks to migrate, like I said, from the South into the North, into the West. The U.S. creates the Bracero program, in which we allow Mexicans to cross the border as short-term work contracts to fill the gap. Women at work, we got Rosie the Riveter here. At first, women were not industrial, but labor shortages threatened the war effort. We're going to have to do it. So here's a group of women working in the welding industry. Here's women working in the munitions industry. Some 6 million women enter the workforce. They're offered better pay, subsidized housing, and health care for the first time. And they also enter jobs that were traditionally male dominated. We even get our first taste of healthcare. Okay, sorry. Unionized labor offers a threat to the war production's effort, because if workers are not happy, workers will strike. If workers strike, then production goes down. So the government, FDR, had to figure out a way to make all the workers happy. Okay? So basically, workers get increased pay and they get better working conditions, all to make them happy so that they don't strike and hurt the war effort. The National War Labor Board will coordinate this. And let's see here. We even passed some laws. The War Labor Disputes Act gave the president authority to seize and operate any strike-bound plant. In other words, if a factory or a plant went on strike, the government could step in, give them criminal penalties, and start running the factory. So it was not in the best interest. It was in everybody's best interest to make the workers happy. The assembly line is key in doing this. Huge success. The U.S. is producing, I mean, look at our economy. This is why World War II brings us out of the Great Depression. Okay, because of the amount of manufacturing we're doing. We're producing 40% of the world's weaponry by the end of the war. All right, so that's almost half for everybody. We had mile-long assembly lines turning out one B-24 bomber per hour. Just an amazing feat. Okay, life on the home front and supporting the war. Like I said, mobilization ends the Depression, and we get some prosperity for the people, so that's a good thing. United States is fortunate. We have some advantages. We're the only belligerent that did not experience war at home. So our factories, our fields, our cities were not being bombed and destroyed. We have all sorts of ways for people to help out by planting victory gardens, recycling scrap metal, etc. Everything was useful at the time of war, from sugar to fat in producing glycerin for explosives. And to coordinate the economy, the consumer economy, was the Office of Price Administration. They rationed food. You could only buy so much of it per month. You had to pay a cash price, and you had to have a rationing booklet. So you got so many ration tickets per month, and you know, things like sugar, coffee, and gas, because it needed to go to the troops. Obviously, to keep people happy, to keep people motivated to support planting victory gardens and recycling and rationing, propaganda is going to be play a huge role. We talked extensively last year about propaganda. And to coordinate this, we have all these new offices. Will be the Office of War Information. Okay, the Office of War Information. Basically, they created all the propaganda and the posters. Okay, and we create near unanimous support for the war. They did a good job. All right, I'm going to stop there, and we'll pick up with the next third on the next installment. Thank you.